This is a presentation from the Supernaut Network.
Joining us now, the director of amazing films such as Drive, Bronson, Only God Forgives, and of course, Valhalla Rising, Mr. Nicolas Refn. Nicolas, thanks so much for taking the time out with us today.
Absolutely.
So, Valhalla Rising it's a science fiction film. It's set in the 1100s. It's a spaghetti western. It's a samurai film. It's a retelling of A Boy and His Dog, and it's just such a fantastic blend of all these genres and stories. How difficult was it for you to kind of put everything together and get everything you wanted into this movie?
Well, it started off really easy because I got the film financed with me saying, I want to do a Viking movie with Mads Mikkelsen. And from a Scandinavian point of view, that was like a bona fide hit because of the two genres combined. And prior to that, the Viking genre is almost like a cursed genre because it's only been really one good movie ever made of it, which was the Richard Fleischer, Kirk Douglas, Tony Curtis movie, The Vikings. So it was pretty much like an open playing field of what could be done. Now, I can't stand Vikings. I can't. I don't get the obsession. I can't stand the look. I have no interest in the mythology, which is the exact reason why I wanted to make a Viking film. Because I'm interested in what doesn't fascinate me. And so I started working on the script, and having very little knowledge of that era, I hired a Norwegian novelist called Roy Jacobsen to kind of help me flesh out the story about this mute warrior, quote unquote. And it just evolved. And then when I started shooting, I changed things again, and I shoot in chronological order. So everything was constant and evolution, but they'd already given me the money. And when the movie was done and the financiers saw it, they hated it. And they thought that this was not what I had originally said I would do. And I know, but remember, my life is like Christmas. You never know where you're going to get, but it's not what you expect. And they were like, yes, that is very true. So the film was a bit of a limbo because nobody really knew what to do distribution-wise. But I was able to hook up with some very good distributors that saw the potentials, and the movie turned out to have a very financial, lucrative life.
You once said that you originally wanted Valhalla Rising to be more of an action film. Was there anything specific that helped it evolve into, as you put it, a metaphysical science fiction film?
Well, it's you say things that people want to hear to get the money. And then when you then have to figure out what to do afterwards. Sure, I mean, there's action in the movie. I think I really wanted to make a science fiction film without science. A science fiction film that had no technology. But the metaphor of, and of course, having now done a movie and having done a lot of, become very knowledgeable about this era of the Vikings, it's very fascinating, and I've certainly gotten a tremendous amount of respect for the whole the time and the fascination for them, because it is very, very fascinating. I mean, they built ships like we build spaceships. You know, they were sailors like we were astronauts. You know, they were warriors like we had armies. You know, there was a very intelligent, clever social structure also within them. So a lot of those things, started making a movie, especially from Roy's knowledge, was very enlightening and very interesting. So a lot of those things became like, it was like, well, this is a science fiction movie. For them to discover America, would it be like us discovering Venus?
Mm-hmm.
No? Mm-hmm. And that was kind of like the approach. And this was halfway through the movie.
You know, it's interesting. Vikings, they're a pretty hot commodity here in 2015, which is a complete turnaround from the environment before Valhalla Rising was produced. You called it a cursed genre, and I'm kind of curious about that. What were the pitfalls and the cliches of earlier Viking-themed films and stories, and how did you avoid or subvert them in Valhalla Rising?
Well, it's not like that. I'm not here to criticize any other movies, but I did watch a few of what had been made, and it's not a genre like the samurai or the cowboy that has great masterpieces and great cinematic storytelling. A lot of it was very, not very well produced material. And every time I was like, why are they wearing those stupid helmets? You know, and they had, it was one of those things where it's like starting to learn more about the Viking culture was like, this is such a fascinating archetype. You know, this is the Scandinavian samurai cowboy. I mean, something has to be. What is it that makes all those other characters so sexy? But what I did was that I stripped away all production design, and I shot the movie just purely in the mountains. And so there was a kind of almost post-apocalyptic feel to it. I tried to minimize all costume just to modern leatherwear, but being very nondescript about it. I had difficulties with the weapon, but that was more of a budgetary thing, because whenever you have something sharp, you have to have an armor on set, and I couldn't afford one. So that's why they very rarely drew their weapons, and because it was too expensive for me to do that. So I had to find other ways of making that work. But I think that it was just a genre that there were not a lot of successes financially. So there hadn't been produced a lot of films. And learning into literature, there's millions of great books about it. But there aren't that many films, unfortunately.
Now, you'd worked with Mads on the Pusher films. What was the difficult challenge of directing him in a role like this where he has no lines?
Well, it's I think what's great about Mads is that when I said it's a very Danish tradition, the whole Viking, people very much grow up with it in school and in our culture. And I grew up in New York, so I didn't have that privilege. But when I called Mads and said, I'm going to make this Viking film and you're going to play this guy, he's like, absolutely, count me in, I'm so doing it. And I go, that's great. And he's only going to have one eye. Oh, cool. I mean, that's like that's so evil and mean. Yeah, and you're not going to have any dialogue. oh, okay. And by the way, you're from outer space. But being someone who's always up for the challenge, she was like, "Yeah, of course I am." So now, when you have actors that are very skilled and have superstar quality, you can photograph them anyway, and it always looks fantastic, engaging. And when you take away an actor's speech, it's you're taking away half their tools. Mm-hmm. So the reliant physicality was very. It was certainly challenging in the beginning to figure out how to make him inhuman and yet still engaging. So he could, anytime there was a feature or reaction in his body that was too human, that was wrong. If it got too robotic and too removed, that was wrong. So it was like trying to make him into an animal without all the traps of doing that. So it took its time, but we very quickly found, because we know each other, a language that we then was able to flow with.
The scene in the film where the One Eye and the Vikings, they arrive at North America, and it becomes a living hell for them. Did this reflect any fears you had as a child first moving to America?
Oh my goodness. I don't think so. I mean, I moved to New York when I was 8, but maybe. But I think the idea that the traveling into the unknown is always terrifying. And the idea that once they come upon this incredible continent, the clashes of religion and power. This was at a time when there's a great movie in the mercenary Vikings going off to fight the Holy War. I mean, there's an amazing epic story in that. They were hired, elite bodyguards throughout Asia, in that period. So historically, it's at a time when Christianity is starting to spread through Northern Europe, and it's basically was 3 scenarios. Either it was by war, it was by money, they would buy people's religion, or it was mutation. And the Vikings basically mutated into Christianity. And at one point, Jesus for them was someone who died in battle. So the idea that when they get upon this continent of possibilities, the priest, and the general essentially become conflicted, where the general wants to conquer, but the priest says, "How can we?" And that's when the general says, "Believe in me." And then, in a way, the concept of One Eye is a character that is almost appears because he has no past. So he is like a kind of an entity that brings everyone to their destiny. And what they realize along the movie, that he's the one that actually brings everyone where they're meant to go. It's a bit like the driver. I mean, it's the same character. Right. The DNA from Valhalla went over to the driver, and that same character went over to the lieutenant in Only God Forgives. And the evolution is that in Valhalla Rising, the character is defined by the way he looks, because he has one eye. The only one joke in the movie where the boy says, "You only have one eye." And the second was in Drive, is he's defined by his action. And in the third one, the lieutenant in Only God Forgives, he has no definition at all. But they all share the same DNA, and they're all basically created out of the same concept.
It's amazing.
I can't help but to fantasize about the Silmarillion by Refn. Do you have any plans or interest in creating another period piece like Valhalla Rises, or something with that kind of atmosphere?
Oh yeah, God. I think that I'm going to do the next installment with this character in Tokyo. So
Ooh.
that's what I kind of started to kind of work on. It's pretty funky, I feel. So I think that I'll probably make that after I do the Neon Demon here.
Which I mean, that sounds fascinating as well. As anything you can tell us about that?
Uh, well, it has a lot of women in it compared to men.
Now, religious themes run through your films quite heavily. Where does religion stand in your personal life?
Well, I'm Scandinavian, so I was brought up under a state, you know. But I certainly think that spirituality is a very important part of our being in existence. And I'm not a religious filmmaker in that sense, or I don't, quote unquote, I don't seek it out. But if it creeps through, I guess it's the need of spirituality rather than the denouncement of it. But my films are very much, you can kind of say, I'm a two-act scenario at the moment, because there were films I made up until Bronson, and Bronson is a very autobiographical movie of my own life. And then there's the films I made after Bronson. Mm-hmm. And those three films have always been very silent. So there's been certain parts of me, and I don't know why I do what I do. I don't have usually an agenda or a plan. It's just what excites me.
You've called yourself in the past, recently, a pornographer who films what you want to see or what arouses you. What is it about what you call the electricity of Los Angeles that just keeps drawing you back there? And how do you see it continuing to play into your artistic vision as a filmmaker?
Well, I guess it's this reason why I always, wherever I go, if I'm staying for a longer period of time, I bring Anger's Hollywood Babylons with me. I guess it's the mythology of LA, which is so fascinating in what I do, and that I always just gravitate towards it. I don't really know why, but I'm very fascinated by the mythology of Los Angeles, because it's like asking what was so great about Rome thousands of years ago. I don't know, but I can say what I find fascinating about Los Angeles. And I can't drive a car, so
which is something that you and I share in common, because I don't have my license either. So.
You become you start seeing the city in another way because you're forced to.
The last I heard, Amazon Studios was developing your Barbarella TV series. Is that still on? And if it is, what will be the tone and thrust of it? Are you thinking of an extension of the original or something else?
That, if I knew that answer, I would be a very, very happy person. Let me put it like this. Barbarella is somewhere in outer space. Let's see if she ever lands on the moon.
That's something I would love to see.
Me too.
Me too. Believe me.
I'd love it.
I would love that.
I say you and Alejandro Jodorowsky are two of my favorite filmmakers, and I would love to know how you two became friends, because it's pretty amazing to me.
Well, we became friends about 5 years ago. I was invited to France to curate a small film festival that they have in Paris. And what the concept is that they have two filmmakers, choose a number of movies and then they show. And I'm not, a cineast. I've not seen every movie ever made. I'm not like a walking encyclopedia. So I didn't have a lot to to participate with. But when I heard that Alejandro Jodorowsky was going to be my other partner in it, I was like, well, God damn it, I want to meet him. I've always been very fascinated by his films, and I was like, sure, I'll make a list. And I asked the festival if there was a chance maybe I could talk to him or something. They were like, yeah, sure, absolutely. And so you make a list of films, and I chose a list of films, and it was all like conventional, like Mildred Pierce and freaks and things like, I'm not an expert, so I just chose the films I liked. And then I got a call from the festival, and they said, well, Jodorowsky has submitted his list of films to be shown, but we have a bit of a problem because they're all your movies. I was like, that's a great idea. But that was kind of like cemented the fact that, we had mutual interest in each other's films. So we got on the phone and we spoke, and I was in prep for Drive. We were just about to shoot, and I said, I'm going to Paris for the weekend. I'm having dinner with Alejandro. And so I flew to Paris, and it was my first time I ever actually myself bought a plane ticket to go somewhere without my family, And we had dinner, and it was great. And I had my first tarot reading, which I've had many of since. And we just had always stayed in touch. And he christened me his spiritual son, which was always very exciting. And he's a great guy. He's very, very inspiring to be around.
And it's amazing. He's doing a Kickstarter for his newest film too. So I just want to make sure that people are aware of that, and they're contributing to this Kickstarter, because he should keep making films. As should you, Nicholas. You should keep making films. We enjoy your films so much. So I know you enjoy it. So we want to support you and make sure that you keep doing this.
Thank you very much. I'm here for you.
Well, we definitely appreciate the time that you took today. And again, best of luck with Neon Demon and everything else you're working on. We really look forward to seeing everything that you do. You're an excellent filmmaker, and we're all huge fans.
Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Have a good day.
Have a good one. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
You too.